Good day. Over the years, and perhaps now more than ever, Western corporate media have systematically mischaracterized the nature of resistance to US and Israeli hegemony in West Asia. The Western media's caricature of the resistance is that it is made up of men who are Islamist fanatics and are bent on killing Jewish persons for no other reason than that they have a burning hatred of the Jewish people. That is the caricature, and we've been subjected to it for decades here in the West. The reality, however, is profoundly different. What is that reality, the reality of the resistance to US and Israeli hegemony? And what can we learn from this reality? And to explore this important question, I'm joined today by Ghadi Francis. Ghadi is a war correspondent based in Lebanon. She has been to conflict zones throughout West Asia, including Syria, Gaza, Yemen, Iraq, and South Lebanon. Today, I would say there are few, if any, journalists in the Western mainstream media who have as much firsthand knowledge and experience of these conflict zones and of the resistance as Ghadi does. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for this introduction. I really hope we will converse up to that standard.
I'm sure we will. So I'd like to begin by talking to you, Ghadi, about this caricature as I've described it. First of all, let's break it down into its constituent parts. We in the West tend to think of resistance to Western domination solely in military terms. But as you've explained in the course of your work, and I recently, just so you know, I watched a fascinating interview you did with Rania Khalek of Breakthrough News. I commend to our viewers that they watch that interview. You talked about the sort of full scope of the resistance and the many forms it takes. Could you elaborate on this?
Well, it's very unfair to just recap only the last 10 or 20 or 30 years about how these people are fighting, the indigenous people, without telling the story full. Yes, there are Islamic ideologies in the resistance that have pioneered, and they have proven that they are more powerful in the deterrence. I'm speaking about Hezbollah and Hamas. They have resisted in military ways that predecessors haven't. But they didn't start it. And it's not because of the ideologies. It's because of the fact that this land was colonized and these people were fighting for their land. In the course and in the process since 1948 till today, many resistance ideologies emerged. They were seculars, they were sectarians, they were non-sectarians, they were Shia, they were Christians, they were communists, they were nationalists. And before all that, these were all sons and daughters of indigenous people who just wanted to defend their homes. Some people meditate for strength. Some people exercise for strength. Some people pray, some people read for their own inner strength. Well, it is the same. Some people go to Islam to get their strength for the resistance. Some people go to actual communist or nationalist ideologies that they hold. The whole point of it was that they wanted to defend their homes. Now, the image that the West has built is very brutal in the sense that this nation, and I speak about it just for the viewers, thank you for following my previous conversations. It makes it so much easier to converse, actually. When I say my nation is not identified by the lines that the British and the French drew after they conquered the Ottoman Empire. We just had an occupation and was changed to a different kind of occupation that cut the land into different smaller nations. So Lebanon emerged, Mount Lebanon plus some cities that were in Syria, like Beirut was a part of Syria, Tripoli was a part of Syria, the southern Lebanon was part of Palestine. I'm talking about the management the Ottoman Empire imposed. So they added a Mount Lebanon to these cities and they formed Lebanon. They added some parts and they formed Jordan. They cut out some parts from northern Syria or from southern Syria, and they changed this. My nation does not start when the actual French and British chose it to be. So in this nation, forever, there was never this terrorist kind of ideologies. This was introduced by Western mainstream media, by Western policies. If we go back to history and to the historical facts of this region, we didn't have mujahideen. The idea, the concept of mujahideen in religion was introduced when the Americans wanted to fight the Soviets to hold this whole region. Or to like this kind of policy of that is today designated as terrorism, that breeds fighting through the book of Islam. These kinds of armed groups first stepped in this land as a product of the West to work for their policies. And in Syria, and I've seen it firsthand, and everybody who knows anything about Syria knows that ISIS in Syria was protected, was harbored, was helped by the West, whether it's directly or not directly. They allowed it to form. They allowed them to commute, to go there. And in the end, they bought their oil for cheaper amounts, so they funded them. These are facts. So when they come and they say they have a problem with the resistance because of the ideology, this is total like BS. It's we cannot buy it because they don't care about the Islam state that is called ISIS, that killed and persecuted Christians, Alawites in Syria, Chaldeans and Ashureen in Iraq and Nineveh, or everything that they did and just in the recent history, in this past decade. They never stopped them. Why didn't they save the Yazidis like they're crying today to save the settlers and the colonials and the illegal occupiers of our land? Because they are bluffing. This is not real. So every time somebody from the West is listening to me, I try to just tell them, our problem is not less. Terrorism is terrorism. Nobody can identify with terrorism. But you cannot get the chance to identify what terrorism is when all we got from you, us and our ancestors, we never received anything from the West but killing, but bombs, but airstrikes. So in my book, no terrorism exceeded the American terrorism in the Middle East. There's still ages for anyone to even compare to what they did in Iraq, you know?
Well, I mean, you know, let's take what the West typically presents as the conventional definition of terrorism, which is targeting civilians or civilian infrastructure for a political objective. I don't know how anybody rationally could say that Israel is engaged in less terrorism than its adversaries when the level of death and destruction it has consistently visited upon the Palestinian people and other peoples of West Asia has been vastly in excess of all of the death and destruction that resistance groups have visited upon the Israeli civilian population. There's no comparison. So it's simply from a purely mathematical perspective, if you apply consistently the Western definition of terrorism, Israel is the worst terrorist actor in the entire region by a wide margin. I don't think that this should be a controversial.
History of humanity. And the entire history of humankind, we don't know about the Stone Ages, but I don't think this much people were murdered in this much time ever.
It's astonishing.
The last numbers are what we're referring to. Nobody killed 185,000 people in 9 months ever.
Mm-hmm. And you're referring here, obviously, to the Lancet study, which those of us who've read it know may actually be an underestimation of the number of people who've been killed directly and indirectly by this monstrous regime. Now, I want to dig a little bit deeper into the resistance, the history of the resistance in Lebanon. I was very struck by your recounting of some of the role that women have played as fighters in the resistance in Lebanon in particular. And you talked about their religious orientation or lack thereof. Could you talk to us about some of these extraordinary figures from the resistance in Lebanon?
Well, one of the most empowering moments is when someone like you comes and asks me about this part today, because I feel like there is a lot of injustice to how much these heroes and heroines of our nation are known. It's a little bit of lack from our part in talking in English about them, and it's also because of the whole mainstream identifying one form of resistance. In this land, there are many who I don't know and I don't memorize their name, but many women are revered, like Norma Abi Hassan. Her name is Norma Abi Hassan. There's Lola Aboud, a communist. There's Sana Muhaidli, a nationalist. And there's also some veteran fighters who attempted in resistance and already are still alive. There are many prisoners of war, women that stayed and that were raped and persecuted, but they remained very persistent, and they survived it all, and they speak about it. Our nation is just blended in that, because women were always part of the resistance, because in general, the women of this nation have always been empowered in history. We've always had women leading. It's not something, we are very different from the Arabian desert and the desert traditions in regarding women, or even the Northern African part and the Northern African culture regarding women. When you speak about Mesopotamia and the Levant in general, you have to understand that throughout history, we've always had women goddesses and women leaders. It's not really something like we find. I don't understand if a woman can breed this much resistance into men as mothers and as sisters. It's only her natural habitat to be a resistant fighter, but that we have our ways. In the 80s, there was this trend of istishhadiyat, we call them like the martyrs. And they wanted to, they were very driven to fight the Israelis to the extent where they bombed themselves at checkpoints, at occupation checkpoints, just to be able to say, no, you will not live freely here. And many other students also. There's Khalid Alwan, he was a student, he was passing in year 19 in the 80s when the Israelis occupied Beirut. He just passed, he just took a gun from a political leader's home, and he shot 3 Israeli army men in a cafe in Hamra in Beirut, and this started a whole Beirut resistance movement at the time. So if you want to go back and to track really the first no that was said in this land, it was never something religious. It's just the natural reflex reaction to indigenous people, and whatever ideologies and thoughts were in the street and in the universities and in the intellectual arena bred that. And today you see that. I mean, everybody was trying to say that in Lebanon, the Sunnis, the Sunni part of the Muslims do not want to fight Israel. It's only the Shia, it's only Hezbollah. Today in Lebanon, as we speak today, there are martyrs from the Sunni Islamic groups and the Shia Islamic groups. And yesterday there was a martyr from the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, which is a secular group. It has nothing to do with the religion. And so this is actually the fact on the ground. Now, Sana Mhaidli, Lola Aboud were people who became very famous and Arab worldwide because they were pioneers at the time as women. But I would recite endlessly names of women who really were resistant fighters, whether it's in their intellect or in their staying there. I cannot think of any lady today that is growing and harvesting her plants in southern Lebanon. She's a top leader in the resistance. This is what I said with Rania. I suppose you heard that too. Mm-hmm. I mean, today the resistance, the act of the resistance is to be there. It's not only to fight or to deter in the military way. Staying there in the south when everybody's trying to take us out of our land is the resistance. Yesterday, I came across a video in Gaza of people sleeping in the street. Massive amount of people. And I've seen these people, they are the most generous and the most well-educated kind of people you can ever, like, it breaks your heart to see them in such disastrous conditions because they are very capable of building the best lives for themselves. If only you give them what you give any human. Mm-hmm. But even that, I never think of them as weak when they are stranded and sleeping, literally families sleeping on the street. They are not weak. They are the strongest in the world. Mm-hmm. Nobody has emerged that persistent after that much annihilation for so many years. Mm-hmm. So these are resistance fighters as well. It is not only the fighting with the self and with the military only. It doesn't add up if it didn't have a very big structural backbone in the education and the ancestral convictions of the people, of the nature of the people. And I mean, you can never change the fact that we are fighting people who came from elsewhere. You can say, you can try to market forever that it's the Arabs hate Jews, Muslims hate Jews. But they came here not as Jews, they came here as invaders. We had Jews, we didn't have a problem. Our indigenous people have no problem with people. But when you want to come and invade my home, You are an invader now. It's not about your religion, no matter how much you tell yourself that. Some people maybe believe it. I can't understand any other reason why to back a baby killer regime or a baby killer occupation, an illegal occupation. It's a land theft that is legalized by the world. I can only understand why when I see that they have bought the whole brainwash team, and they really think that they are entitled to bring people and tell them, if you read that book, you are entitled to take that land because in that book it says it's yours, even though you're from Poland, you're from Manhattan, you're from Russia, you're from wherever they are from. Why are they entitled to take my land? I don't understand. Nobody can really convince me. Why shall I give my father's land to Jack from Manhattan? This is what happened in Sheikh Jarrah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to comment upon this this observation you just offered about simply being in these regions, in these areas of conflict, is in of itself a form of extraordinary resistance. During the past 9 months, this 9 months of genocide, I had the opportunity to go to South Lebanon 3 times. I went, yes, since in the last 9 months. My last visit
Welcome home.
So this is all sort of very fresh in my lived experience. And you know, I was in Hula, which had been it had been evacuated, but 2 young resistance fighters were killed, and the villagers came back for the funeral. And I happened to be there on that day, and I observed the funeral. And the next day,
did you see the spirit?
Absolutely. And I just want to sort of give you a flavor of what I experienced to ask you to comment on this. The next day, by the way, the Israelis struck the square with an airstrike where the funeral had been held. I was in Bin Jebel at a time when, on a day when an Israeli drone strike killed 3 people at the entrance to the hospital. I was in Baalbek shortly after some civilian infrastructure had been destroyed. I was in Marjayoun, and spoke to people there early in the conflict. So I have to say that I was absolutely amazed by to find the words, the steadfastness, the equanimity, the calm with which these people live. They are actually living, breathing with their children in a combat zone. And while you certainly can feel their apprehension and their concern, their steadfastness was really something to behold. And I came away from, one of the many impressions I had was, you know, the lived experience of people in northern Israel and in Israel generally is very different from that of the people of South Lebanon. These are people who are inured to conflict. Yeah, and that's absolutely a factor. I'd like you to comment upon that. But also, I think that one of the reasons why Israel is hurtling towards a strategic defeat is because its population doesn't have the same level of experience with this kind of grotesque violence that Israel has been visiting upon the people of Lebanon and the Palestinian population for decades. What are your thoughts about all of this? Do you think that this is a population that is psychologically prepared for an existential war in Israel?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for taking the time and the danger to come and to be with my people in such times, historical times. I really thank you on behalf of every Lebanese and every person, every human in this struggle. It's very good to feel seen and to feel like it's very dangerous. You could have been killed in all these places where you were talking about. I know what's happening there, and especially in Hula. So thank you for being courageous enough and for wanting to deliver the truth. Number 2, I don't regard them as population. They are not a population. They are people who have been brought to live in camps on other people's land. And they have dual passports, most of them. And they have other lives and family members elsewhere, most of them. And they have empowered systems that could take them wherever they chose to be, most of them. On the other side, there are people who have been born here. Most of them are sons of martyrs or related to a martyr that has been killed by the invaders. This is one. So they have something to defend, and they have something, they're angry, and they have injustice that they have seen. I am a Lebanese person. I have seen massacres to my people. I'm 35 years old. I have seen seasons of massacres to my people all my life. I have seen dead babies when I was still a baby. And I've seen them when I was a teenager, and I've seen them in college. We are angry enough to never want to go away. And we have been tested enough. Just yesterday, something happened. My dad was telling me, my father, who has also lived that, was telling me there's a new martyr for us in the South. And my mom was starting to get emotional. And I was like, Mom, why are you being emotional? We are all martyrs. It's either here or there. If we don't fight there, they're gonna come and kill us here. We have to be real enough. This is our mindset. I'm telling you, this is how I think as a Lebanese, not because I'm a journalist or because I'm more courageous. This is how our lives have been. It is always a chance that you can be bombed in your home, in your hospital, in your school, even in the northern Lebanon, in Beirut, wherever you are. So these people who are fighting in the front line, it is not a choice or maybe a preference. It is who they are until they are liberated, and they have done it before. So they are not afraid, because even death, for me, when I see my people being massively slaughtered, I don't care about my personal life anymore. I'm being very genuine. So what if I die? Am I more important than Shireen Abu Aqli? Am I more important than all the journalists who were sniped? Am I more important than the babies, than the women, than the mothers, than the men, than the brothers? So this is where we're coming from. We have always been killed. We always have a lot of pain and anger. We are immune enough to never step back from here. But on the other side of the borders, there are, if you call them population, if you call them civilians, if you call them beautiful little peacemakers, whatever you call them, they are the product of invasion. They are the product of a system that brought them here, that empowered their existence on other people's land, and they have the power to go away. For us, it's either you live here or you die here. You don't have a third choice. You know?
Yeah. A word that you've used several times, Ghadi, in our conversation is martyr. I just want to ask you about that term. It's a very important term in the discourse around the resistance. This word has origins in the Greek language. The ancient Greek word is martyras, which simply means witness, to witness. What is it? What do you mean by this word? And when it's employed by the resistance, does it have a similar meaning or a different meaning?
Very beautifully, in many of the ancient Greek mythology and philosophies, you find similarities to the ancient Syrian, Greater Syrian, which is like Mesopotamia and Babylon and Canaanites and Sumer. So exactly, this is the case in Arabic. Shahid comes from shahid, comes from shahada, which is a witness. So it also has the same linguistic tree or root. Actually, as Shahid, the martyr is a person who is willing to die for others or for something bigger than himself. Whether it's something you approve of or not, it's a kind of heroic act where you die defending your country, your nation, your ethics, your values, some people your religion, your family, whatever you stand for. And even if you're dying in not fighting, but if they kill you like that, and in that war you are a martyr. I think the only reason, and I don't want to speak about like religion and spirits and justice and God and peace, and in the end, the only reason that is we are walking closer and closer to liberation is the amount of martyrs that this land has put, is the amount of blood and sufferings and sacrifices and blood, tears and sweat. I mean, I can cry whenever I think of anything my people have been through. And this is the case for everyone. So because this death, this martyrdom, this witness to this reality is being is being like stamped by blood. This is the only reason why we will definitely win the struggle, and we will get the liberation in the end.
And am I correct that the word martyr, as you use it, is not something confined to the Muslim community? This is I find the non-Muslim elements of the resistance movement routinely use the concept of martyrdom in their discourse. Isn't that fair?
Well, everybody uses it as a word in Arabic. Al-Shahid, the martyr, is a human who dies for something greater than his own personal wants or needs, his own self. His, like he is really a sacrifice, and then whether even if you're an atheist and you're defending my country, and you die for me, you are a martyr. Yani, it's some people may philosophize the word, but in Arabic it just means that.
Okay. Now, I'd like to talk to you in the time remaining to us more about the realities on the ground in South Lebanon. We have been hearing endlessly for months and months interminable discourse and chest thumping coming out of the Israeli regime about how they're going to destroy Lebanon and they're going to bring an end once and for all to the Islamic resistance, or at least they're going to drive the forces of the resistance north of the Litani River, and they're going to bomb Lebanon back to the Stone Age and so forth and so on. The same kind of genocidal language we've been hearing and seeing play out in occupied Palestine. And yet, throughout it all, and even though there have been daily attacks on military assets in northern occupied Palestine by the resistance, there has been no attempt to enter South Lebanon. There's no been invasion of any kind. And there doesn't seem to be any real preparations going on for an invasion. Do you believe that there's any element of reality to this talk of the Israeli military being able to bring to an end the resistance in Lebanon once and for all, or even to drive the forces north of the Litani River? Or is this, do you agree with my assessment that it's borderline delusional?
It's borderline delusional, and I think they don't even believe their own lies at that point. I mean, we still remember what they wanted to do on October 8th. They wanted to eradicate Hamas. We can just look at the breaking news and see that up till date, after everything that they have done, there are rockets being fired from Gaza by Hamas. They didn't eradicate anything. If they weren't able to defeat the resistance that is under their eye in their open-air prison with billion-dollar funds and constant bombing, and they weren't able to defeat them, we're talking about Hezbollah. People just with a very fast, brief refresh on the search engines, they can check what Hezbollah has accomplished in Syria, what Hezbollah has accomplished in the past 15 years since its last trial of invasion. Its last time the Israelis tried to invade Lebanon, Hezbollah has grown military-wise and expertise-wise. And I think the only reason why the Israelis are not invading Lebanon is because simply they have no capacity to do so. Not today, and inshallah never. And if they try, they will receive the same deterrence that they received in 2006. After trying for 33 days, they just went back. They carried all their losses and their broken tanks, and they went back and they started working on a future time where they can defeat Hezbollah. For now, let's see if they still after 9 months, they're not being able to defeat the underground resistance in Gaza. I have big doubts that they can even sustain a football match with our resistance on ground.
I'm sticking with my prediction in November of last year that Israel is going to find itself in a strategic defeat very shortly. In fact, I think it's there now, and it's simply that the rhetoric has not caught up with the awful reality of this for the apartheid state. I want to conclude our discussion by talking about the tumultuous events in the United States. Ghadi, we've seen some truly extraordinary things.
I don't envy Americans, man, poor thing. I mean, imagine having the choice of Kamala Harris, who's been invented and funded by AIPAC and at a certain point by Trump himself in the past, when she ran for Attorney General or something. So imagine having to choose between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Oof, I don't envy them.
Yeah,
this is really, it says it all. I mean, This says it all. I really think it's all Americans find themselves in an unclear situation. I don't think the American people are happy to be funding a genocide. I don't think so. But I think they're busy with their own local policies. Maybe some of them are brainwashed. They don't know enough. Maybe the resistance has been presented to them in a bad way. But I really do hope that this decline in the political life in the United States breeds into something better, because the way it looks, it is going to become worse and worse decade after decade for the United States of America, and we are witnessing the end of an empire, and we haven't seen any empire that lasted more than 100 years, and I think maybe it's time.
Absolutely.
And we're witnessing it.
The problem is that this empire has nukes, so it's something that has to preoccupy us, unfortunately. I want to talk about how this clown show, I think that's the only way to fairly describe it now in the United States, might impact West Asia. So I think I agree. We're either looking at a Trump presidency or a Kamala Harris presidency in all likelihood. The odds seem at this particular moment to favor Donald Trump. But who knows? You know, several months is an eternity in politics. Let's imagine that Trump does emerge as the next president of the United States. How do you think this will impact U.S. government policy towards West Asia, if at all? Do you foresee any meaningful changes? And if so, what do you anticipate those changes would look like?
Well, we have a problem in the analysts in West Asia. Most of the people who know anything about the American policies work for them. So when they're speaking, they are too biased to even tell you the facts. They always like, America's going to win everything, and then they start their speech. So you don't get facts. Nobody's really trying to understand the realities. They're always, we're going to win because Trump's going to win. No, we're going to win because they think they take it personally. And the other analysts have antagonized the speeches towards the United States. So you cannot really decode the reality. But what we know about Donald Trump is that you cannot expect anything from this personality. I mean, he's the one who did the normalization deals and empowered Netanyahu and empowered the Israelis. And in the same time, he's the one that killed Qasem Soleimani and that took these shots. But at the same time, some people think that he's the one who would like reinitiate talking because he's business oriented. This is what the analysts say. For me, if Donald Trump emerges, or if Jack Jackson emerges, the American empire, the deep state, the military, the bills, the billions, the APAC, the power of America is the one that is empowering the slaughter of our people, no matter who the president is. It's like two kinds of the same blood bath. I cannot choose between the Democrats and the Republicans, or between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, because whatever I've received from both policies in the Middle East has been blood. It's just a different shape of it. The Democrats tell you, we're going to ask them why they did that. The Republicans are a little bit unapologetic about it. But in the end, who didn't kill us in the past 50 years of America?
Right.
Name it, I'll wait, you know?
Yeah, and if your assessment is correct, and I'm sad to say that it very likely is correct, I see no reason to believe that either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump will be any less brutal, savage, lawless, criminal in their behavior towards Palestine, Lebanon, and other areas of West Asia. Then it seems to me that ultimately this is going to be decided on the battlefield. The battlefield, by the way, not being only military conflict, there's also an economic war happening, and Israel is suffering economic. Do you agree with that assessment, that that's ultimately what is going to decide this conflict?
This is not only an assessment I'd agree with. This has been the method of life for me and for my people for all the past decades of like awareness in politics. We always know, and even like in the 40s, a great thinker who's my icon and my idol in life, Antoun Saadi. I'm now talking to you from this area, his motherland. He emerged he was the first one to fight the Zionists as a political thinker and leader in Lebanon. And he used to say, القوة هي القول الفصل في معارك التحرير القومي. The power is the only strength in this struggle, the power of the fire, the power of the battlefield. They're never gonna love us enough to stop killing us. It's always gonna be our deterrence, our sovereignty, our self-confidence, and we have no choice but to believe in ourselves and our people. And if it's not today, it's tomorrow. This is like our only choice.
Ghadi, it's been a great pleasure speaking with you, and I hope we'll have opportunities in the future to continue this vitally important conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.